£2 million. That's the line that's about to split Britain's priciest postcodes in half.
Now, one of the striking things about, I don't really know whether it is a mansion tax, everybody wants to call it that, but this is this new council tax levy graded on more expensive properties worth more than £2 million.
Cross it, and from 2028, you're handed a tax bill of up to £7,500 a year. Every year, forever. Stay 50 grand under it, and you pay nothing extra at all. Nobody's been billed yet. The tax isn't even law. And right now, in 2026, sellers across London are already slashing prices just to dodge a charge that doesn't technically exist. That's not caution, that's panic, 2 years early. And once you understand why, the rest of this story starts to make a lot more sense. Back in November 2025, in her autumn budget, Chancellor Rachel Reeves announced something officially called the Value Council Tax Surcharge. Nobody calls it that, obviously. Everyone calls it the mansion tax.
And so, from 2028, I am introducing the Value Council Tax Surcharge in England, an annual £2,500 charge for properties worth more than £2 million, rising to £7,500 for properties worth more than £5 million. This will be collected alongside council tax, levied on owners, and we will consult on options for support or deferral.
It's a new annual charge on homes in England worth £2 million or more, and it sits on top of your existing council tax bill, not instead of it. Quick context: every single home in England already sits in one of 8 council tax bands, A through H, based on its value, and that decides your normal yearly bill. This new surcharge is a separate extra layer stacked specifically on top of the priciest homes within those bands. Now you might be thinking, £2 million, that's not me, why should I care? Fair question. Stick with me, because the reason this matters goes way beyond the people who actually own these homes. The mechanics are simple enough once you strip away the jargon. There are 4 bands. A home worth between £2 million and £2.5 million pays £2,500 a year extra. Between £2.5 million and £3.5 million, it's £3,500. Between £3.5 million and £5 million, £5,000. And anything above £5 million pays the full £7,500. Those numbers will also rise with inflation every year from 2029 onwards, so they're not even fixed. Think of it a bit like stamp duty cliff edges, which most people buying a house in the UK have already bumped into. Cross a certain price, and suddenly an extra slice of tax kicks in all at once, not gradually. That's exactly the kind of cliff edge behavior we're already seeing with this tax, 2 years before it even exists. Nobody wants to be the unlucky homeowner sitting at £2,050,000, paying thousands more than the neighbour at £1,950,000, especially when the difference between those two houses might just be a slightly nicer kitchen. It's the owner who pays, not the occupier. So if you're renting a
Let's
£2
travel
million
back to
house,
1991.
relax, that bill
While the
isn't
world
yours.
rapidly
But
advanced,
if you're a
this house
landlord
value
with that
remained
property in your
completely
portfolio,
frozen, locked
congratulations,
to its past
you've
valuation.
just found a new annual cost that wasn't in your spreadsheet last year. But here's where it gets interesting, because the justification behind this tax is actually pretty hard to argue with on paper. Council tax in England is still based on property values from way back in 1991. Yes, 1991, before most of us owned a mobile phone. Housing Secretary Steve Reed gave an example that's been doing the rounds: a normal family home in Darlington or Blackpool, worth around £400,000 today, pays roughly £2,400 to £2,600 a year in council tax. Meanwhile, a £10 million mansion in Mayfair, because it was only worth that under the old 1991 banding, pays about £2,100, less than the house in Darlington. That's the gap the government says it's trying to close. You know what that means in practice? It means the system everyone's been quietly living with for over 3 decades has been mathematically backwards the entire time, and almost nobody outside of property nerds noticed until a chancellor needed to find money. Funny thing, this isn't a new idea. A mansion tax has been knocking around British politics since 2009, when the Liberal Democrats, Vince Cable, first floated taxing homes worth over £1 million. The threshold crept up, the idea got dropped, picked up again by Ed Miliband's Labour Party in 2013, then quietly buried once more.
Can you help us with another of your policies, the mansion tax? According to your leader in Scotland, this is a way of taking money out of the southeast of England and giving it to Scotland.
Shall I explain?
Do, please.
So we're going to levy a mansion tax on homes above £2 million. Now, it is true that most of those homes are in the southeast. And it's also true that there are consequentials of that spending for Scotland. That's the way the United Kingdom works.
Consequentials?
Well, it's the way the money gets distributed. And that some of that money will be spent in Scotland. But let me make this point, because it's really important. This is part of being a United Kingdom. If there are young people who are unemployed in Newcastle, and the money for a banker's bonus tax, more of it is raised in London, we help those young people in Newcastle. If another tax falls somewhere else, then we help people across the United Kingdom. If there are poor kids in London, we help them. So that is part of being a United Kingdom. You have redistribution across the United Kingdom. So this is absolutely a principle of a country that stays together and looks after each other.
George Osborne even mocked the whole concept back in 2012, warning that whoever introduced it would wake up one day to find their own modest home suddenly labelled a mansion. 15 years of false starts, and it took a chancellor staring down a multi-billion-pound gap in the public finances to actually push it through. This next part sounds backwards, but stay with me. Even though the tax isn't due for 2 years, the market's already reacting like it's here. Estate agency Hamptons tracked offers on homes priced within 10% of that £2 million line. In February 2026, 83% of those offers came in below £2 million. A year earlier, that figure was just 64%. That's not a small shift. That's people actively negotiating prices downward, on purpose, purely to land on the safe side of a tax threshold that doesn't even apply yet. Economists have a slightly dry name for this. They call it bunching, basically everyone crowding just under the line to avoid crossing it. The government's own forecaster, the Office for Budget Responsibility, has already said it expects exactly this kind of distortion. So in a strange way, the tax is already shaping the market before a single bill has landed on anyone's doormat. And here's the thing nobody's fully solved yet. How do you actually value these homes fairly? The Valuation Office, which is part of HMRC, has to identify every property in England worth over £2 million using 2026 prices. We're talking somewhere between 150,000 and 200,000 properties, according to testimony given to the Treasury Committee earlier this year. That's been described as the biggest property revaluation exercise in more than 30 years. Most of these valuations won't involve anyone knocking on your door. They'll mostly be desk-based, using sales data, satellite imagery, and planning records. The Telegraph reported that officials are even factoring in things like box rooms, studies, and garages when estimating value, which sounds almost comically detailed until you remember they're trying to draw a hard line at exactly £2 million across an entire country. What comes next might surprise you, because it's not just the obviously wealthy who get caught in this. Getting this valuation exercise right matters enormously. Wales is gearing up for its own council tax revaluation, also due 2028, and even the prep work has sparked a political row over whether the data and timetable are ready. HMRC has reportedly been recruiting up to 1,000 extra valuation staff, though only around a third of those roles will work on the mansion tax directly. Once the figures land, homeowners get a formal right to challenge their banding through the valuation tribunal, much like council tax disputes work today. Transparency campaigners have raised a more awkward question though. What happens when a £10 million house sits behind a trust, an offshore company, or a chain of entities registered abroad? A council can knock on a door, but it's harder to bill a postbox in the British Virgin Islands. The Valuation Office's own chief executive told MPs that homes currently worth around £1.5 million are being reviewed too, in case rising prices push them over the threshold by the time the valuation actually happens. So if your home's crept up in value over the last few years, even slowly, you might be closer to this than you think. There's also a quieter group worth a mention. Research from The Telegraph found over 110 social or former social homes sold for more than £2 million since 2021, mostly in London. It's an odd consequence nobody really planned for, a policy aimed at the genuinely wealthy occasionally brushing up against homes that started life as social housing. Now you might be thinking, surely there's some protection for people who aren't cash rich, just sitting in a house that happened to go up in value. And actually, yes, there is. The government's consultation, published on the 19th of May 2026, proposes a deferral scheme. If your household income is below £35,000 a year, you can delay paying the charge until the property is sold, transferred, or you pass away. It won't disappear, it just gets parked until there's a sale to pay for it. That detail matters a lot for one specific group: older homeowners who bought a family home decades ago for next to nothing, watched the area gentrify around them, and now technically own a mansion on paper while living on a modest pension. Asset rich, cash poor, as the phrase goes. This tax was clearly designed with London's ultra-wealthy in mind, but the people most likely to feel real pressure from it might actually be a retired couple in Hampstead who've lived in the same house since the 1980s. The same consultation is also testing the water on something bolder: a possible extra premium for owners who don't live in the UK. The government's own wording flags concern that demand from overseas buyers, particularly in London, might be adding extra pressure on prices and availability for everyone else. Nothing's confirmed, it's genuinely just a question being asked right now, but if it lands, a non-resident owner of a £6 million townhouse could end up paying considerably more than a British family living in an identical one next door. And it's not just regular homeowners caught in this net, either. Reports following the budget suggested the royal family won't be automatically exempt. Properties like Sandringham or Prince William's new home, Forest Lodge in Berkshire, reportedly valued around £16 million, would technically fall within scope if treated as private residences rather than official ones. Buckingham Palace isn't going anywhere, obviously, but the detail shows how broadly this net has been cast. Here's a number that puts the geography into perspective. Around half of all properties in England valued above £2 million sit in London, and roughly 85% are in London and the South East combined, according to analysis from estate agents Hamptons. So if you live in, say, Newcastle or Cardiff, this is almost entirely someone else's problem. If you live in Kensington, Richmond, or parts of Surrey, it's suddenly very personal. This is where the bigger picture starts to matter, because the mansion tax isn't happening in isolation. The non-domicile tax regime, which let wealthy residents shield overseas income from UK tax, was scrapped in April 2025. Roughly 1,800 non-doms reportedly left Britain that year, heading mostly to places like Dubai, Monaco, and Geneva. Of the priciest London sales this year, those above £15 million, an estimated 65% were sold by non-doms making their exit. Add the looming mansion tax on top, and prime central London prices have fallen by close to a quarter since their 2014 peak, according to industry analysis. Landlords aren't escaping either. From April 2027, tax on rental income is rising by 2 percentage points across every band, pushing the basic rate to 22%, higher rate to 42%, and additional rate to 47%. Combine that with the mansion tax hitting high-value rental properties from 2028 and you start to see a pattern. The government is squeezing returns on expensive property from multiple directions at once. So where does this leave you, practically? If your home's nowhere near £2 million, this barely touches your life directly. If you're close to that threshold, the consultation is still open until the 14th of July 2026, and the final rules haven't been locked in yet. Genuinely, if you've got strong views, responding to a government consultation isn't glamorous, but it's one of the few moments where ordinary feedback can still shift policy detail before it becomes law. What's clear is this isn't really a story about a handful of oligarchs in Belgravia, even though that's the image the phrase mansion tax conjures up. It's a story about how Britain quietly decided, after 15 years of avoiding the question, that property values frozen since 1991 can't keep underpinning the tax system forever. Whether £7,500 a year actually fixes that fairness gap, or just adds a messy new layer on top of an already messy one, is something we'll only really know once the first bills go out in 2028. If you found this useful, you know the drill. Like it, subscribe, and let me know in the comments whether you think this tax goes far enough or whether it's missing the bigger problem entirely.